Hello, hello, hello. Happy Friday. Not sure what day most people are listening to this, but today is a beautiful Friday here in Maryland. And I want to thank everybody for listening to our podcast, Ask My Man Manny. And myself, Manny Henson, CFP, and
Dr. Abbey Durkin.
And
psychologist to the stars.
Awesome. Exactly. And I want to thank everybody again for joining us. And we have a really great show in mind today. And I think one of the things that we always kind of take for granted is like how we ended up being where we were or where we are now. And today, this is going to be our last episode. It's going to be more like an introduction. The next couple episodes, hopefully we'll have some audience participation. We'll have some submissions. There'll be a live forum on our Facebook page and also a link on our website to submit your concerns. Something that you're going through, you can do it on an anonymous basis. And we'll perhaps pick your situation to review, read out, and it will give us our honest opinion. From my perspective, which is a finance perspective, for Dr. Abbey's perspective, from a psychological, family dynamics perspective. And so you'll get a number of different options. And we probably won't agree. I think that's going to be the most interesting part. I'm curious about where we would differ on certain things. So it's going to be really, really good. But with all that being said, like I said, my name is Manny Henson. I own Gamma Wealth Management and have so for the last 3 years, but I've been in the industry for about 15 years. And I'll go into my spiel and kind of why I got to this thing. But Abby, you want to say more about what you're doing right now? And
yeah, so I'm a clinical psychologist.
How you got here?
Yeah, for sure. I'm a clinical psychologist, and the road to getting that done, it has been just incredible amounts of challenges, resilience, perseverance, and boy, I relate to the topics that we're going to talk about, especially in terms of finance. There's such a broad range of ways that psychology and finance intersect, from macro and microeconomics all the way to, human behavior and personal decision making. But to really be human about this, where I came from was not a great place financially, and had really big dreams like a lot of kids, and I thought, oh, I'm gonna go and do this giant thing. But I didn't know anything about student loans, and I didn't know anything about money. And so now, I'll be interacting with you guys from a place of experience that can only really be learned through pain. And I want to really put a face to some of these financial struggles that we go through at different points in life, and how do we not let the psychology of the moment interfere, or at least how do we stay present and have good, presence of mind and self-awareness as we are making these choices, and how do we think about ourselves before the choices and after those choices. So money has been, oh my gosh, it's been just such a emotionally charged issue in my life growing up, and then all through different points. It's really been the third wheel as I've gone through the past 4 decades. So yeah, it deserves to be here. It's not going to be just all about, frou-frou psychology stuff. It's really stuff. More, it's really more about how do we go through, and how did we get here? Like what is the why behind even having a psychologist and a CFP doing a podcast? It seems like an unlikely pairing, but it's it's proven in our past conversations to be really dynamic and interesting. So I agree, the different perspectives that we have are going to be exciting, hopefully for people to listen to and participate with us.
No, I think it really does make sense. And the way I think about it is like sometimes life gives you the test before the lesson, and for most people, they just stumble over financial topics. They're like may at a major point in their lives where they have to deal with it and kind of think not reactively, but uh, like deliberately on what they're going to do. So, but most people don't. Most people don't think about it deliberately. It's kind of like
Yeah.
one of these things that kind of happen is that it's a the side still show from like doing the other things that are more important in your life. And I recognize that working with a lot of very well to do high net worth clients in my past, that's if you have the things that are already going in the right direction, you have the emotions managed, you're arriving there. And those most people I was talking to have already kind of tackled those challenges in my past career. Now I'm talking to people as they're going through it,
Yeah.
and as they're going through that phase of like coming through the 20s and 30s and 40s, cleaning things up, and then hopefully being a millionaire on the other side of 50 and 60.
Yeah.
And so the the challenge I see is yes, X, 2 plus 2 is 4, right? But when 2 plus 2 represents you doing something that you emotionally have a hard time doing it,
Wow.
it's so much harder to accept the answer, right? And that's kind of where the heart of what I do and what I love about what I do is like, yeah, it's easy in a vacuum if you could just put all the other subjects in your life aside and just write down the pen and paper. You can open your Excel, and I can show you all types of things I've done to calculate the perfect answer for an abstract concept and in a probabilistic range of outcomes. Like I can do that all day. But when it comes down to you using your own money, your sweat and blood to do something, that's when it gets real. And so this is kind of a good segue into what kind of got me to do this. And really, and I started looking at investments around the raw like late 90s. I heard about all these people making money on tech stocks. So I twisted my mom's arms to kind of take me to Willow Grove, and this was to go to a bookstore, Barnes and Noble. Not sure if they're even still there, but when we went to go to bookstores, and I got How to Invest on the Internet for Dummies, and
Wow.
I just kind of got, yeah, so I was probably about 13, 14. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is really, really cool. And we going to just like dive into it and start looking at CNBC and started looking at Daytech and these other platforms, CD Ameritrade, paper trading. And I also started paper trading. And so I was like, oh my goodness, to see the idea, like you could take your money, you can go in the stock market, and then you can make something, a sizable amount of money and profit, over a course of a couple hours just waiting. But I knew it was more to that, right? So my thought is like, how does this system all work? Because I love looking at my father would just like we can attest this. I used to love like taking things apart and then putting them back together
Oh
as a
my
kid.
God.
So like if I had something like there's like it probably shouldn't be taken apart. Okay, I did it. I just took it apart and then try to put it right back together. And that's kind of how I kind of looked at the market and economics. So I started economics on my senior exit project, which kind of had my classmates kind of like, what the hell is he talking about? Was on
Yes.
capitalism and Adam Smith and understanding economics, and then I was going to go to school for economics, and realized that finance, is applied economics, and it's probably pretty direct to getting a job.
Right.
I didn't come from um, the poorest family, but I didn't come from the wealthiest family either. And so I wanted to make sure that I had a nice living. And yeah, so I graduated, went to very large, well-known asset manager, learned like how to kind of deal with the worst of worst situations, and because it was right as the financial crisis started, so like I had
Yeah.
about a couple of months under my belt of the real world experience, and next thing you know, I'm on the phone with a guy who's saying I would jump out the window right now if it wasn't for the fact this is a third floor, and tell me why I need to keep my $1 million with you. Another person's like, tell me why I'm going to keep my $1 million. You're going to call Fidelity as well, and either one of you or only one of you are going to keep my money. And so it's like
Yeah.
when things are not going well,
Yeah.
that's the test. That's when you're getting the test, right? It's not when like you have all these options, you have all the time to make a decision. It's really about helping people with that, and that's what I loved about financial planning, and when I first really got involved. And so I recognize that I want to really make an impact to people who aren't already close to the finish line, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That I really wanted to help people. Like, yes, I love talking to people who are close to the finish line. I do a lot for those people, but I also want to help those people who are further away. You're getting started, trying to figure
Right.
out whether or not they want to get finished working, at some point in time in their lives.
Yeah.
Um, and so I broke off, went to a couple of different firms, started writing my business plan. Long story longer, uh, got with a really good consulting firm that helped me with the compliance side, the business applications, goal planning, all the things you need as a business consultant, and got started. And
Yeah.
so that was that was like a 15-year high level overview. Like I kind of skipped a lot of
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
ways I got to where we are, where I am, but it's mainly been sales and marketing focused, client relationship focused. Um,
Yeah.
but how about you? Like, what got you? And then I met you.
Oh,
We
yeah.
met on LinkedIn, and we kind of did a couple of different shows. We're kind of looking at how to support, how to cross pollinate ideas and get different opinions and things, and we just kind of um, got
Yeah.
to where we are. But how about you?
Yeah.
What made you want to go into psychology?
Well, I mean, it's been a journey, like I mentioned. When I was a kid, I watched my parents just make absolutely horrible financial decisions, and I would be very anxious about it. And I remember being in fourth and fifth grade, and we'd go out to the local Red Lobster, and I wouldn't order much because I knew our family finances as a
Mm,
fourth grader, and I was at the table every time we
mm,
went out. I'd ask to see the bill, and I'd ask directly, like, "Do we have enough for this?" And mom and dad, like, serious debt, impulse spending. Like, we never had enough to cover basics, and so then there was a single parent situation. Dad left, and it
mm,
was me, my mom, and my sister, and it got even worse from there. And I went
mm,
into this prestigious high school. It was application based and international, and I was surrounded by high net worth kids. And I
mm,
had nothing. Like, it was thrift shops
mm,
and like church kitchen type foods. Um, and it was really, really tough to reconcile. And I felt like on the financial side of things, I was living in this, I was living a double life financially, where I had to look better than I was. And then I got accepted into some prestigious universities, and the financial decisions that were made by my parent at the time made it impossible for me to go to my first choice. And I was denied because they would not contribute anything in terms of the FAFSA. And at the same time, money can be kind of an injurious thing, right? So at the same time that my parent was telling me we didn't have the funds to contribute to what the FAFSA said our estimated family contribution was, I came back one day from school and there was like trucks out front and the kitchen was getting remodeled. And so it was really like a huge slap. And I had to emancipate myself from the home when I was in high school and was living with my sister, and really, really like very big financial struggles. But despite the reality, like despite the financial reality that I was in, maybe I was just like delusional because it never stopped my dreams. Like I had this gut feeling like this was temporary, that this was weird, that this was not going to be my path or my future. But Manny, I had like zero data to support that belief. It was just this die-hard core belief that this was not my future, and that the further away I got myself from a really kind of backwards upbringing, the farther I could go. So I didn't know what I was doing, and I ended up racking up an incredible amount in student loans. At the same time, I was getting an advanced degree, bachelor's, master's, PhD, and was taking out signature loans and student loans left and right, because the concept of money it never really existed in my head. It was so totally abstract because I had no experience with it, that I was signing every document that the financial aid office put in front of me. And I had this really crazy idea like, oh, well, once I become a doctor, fill in the blank, everything is going to be sunshine and rainbows and unicorns. And that was not it at all. It became, I wouldn't say harder, but I was on my own. I was a single parent at that point myself, and was facing this incalculable debt. And it was a debt that I thought I'm going to die before this is paid off. And how was I supposed to stay present and in a helping profession, especially with some of the populations that I was working with, which were also very diverse, connecting with people who also came from poverty. How was I supposed to stay present with that? And while I was in graduate school, despite the amount of signature loans that I was taking out to survive, it wasn't enough. And I couldn't afford to have an apartment. And I was going to school in Palo Alto for my doctorate and couldn't afford an apartment. And so I knew I couldn't go back home to where it was poverty stricken and unsupportive and toxic. So I bought a really ratty sailboat, and I lived on this tiny 27-foot sailboat with my baby. And I had no food. I didn't have money for gas. And so I would steal food from doctors' lounges in hospitals that I was interning at and doing practicums at. And I lived around these hotels in the Bay Area, right around the airport. And I knew when all the brunches were. And so Saturday morning, I'd take the baby and we would pretend like we were staying at the hotel. And we got away with that for months before one of them caught on and started to ask for room keys. So that got shut down. And, I made it in terms of, I made friends, I networked, I used all of my human skills to network. And cause that was survival mode, like I used to feel really ashamed about what I'm telling you, but it really was survival mode. So I started to network and make friends, and then they invited me to things. And sometimes it was like, okay, I have to make this meal last for 3 or 4 days. But it was so weird because I was in a PhD program and I was working at Stanford, and again, high net worth, ultra high net worth Silicon Valley people. And I was sleeping in the labs with my baby sometimes because I couldn't afford to drive from the lab back to the boat. And it was bizarre, because my peers they were jetting off to Indonesia for spring break, or, having, fine dining experiences in San Francisco. And I'm looking at a muffin that I saved for a day,
Mm.
or, realizing I had exactly $5 left in my bank account and making a decision. And, Taco Bell, that's where my money went the farthest. And to, to go from that level of survival mode to this idea of I am going to make it. That
Mm.
transition is something that I think is really worth talking about, as well as not being ashamed when you're in survival
Yeah.
mode, because that shame, if I would have let the shame win, I wouldn't have made it, you know. But now,
Right.
I was able to pay off that debt. I went through a public service loan forgiveness program, which I know is the devil. It's super controversial, but I did it.
No.
and and they made good on their promise, and I was sobbing. This was 2 years ago. I got the call when my 10 years was up, and I'm like sobbing in the car on the phone with the rep, and I had them repeat it 3 times, and finally the guy was like, Dr. Durkin, you do not have any more loan payments to make. You are done. You have 0.0 in your, and I'm bawling. And I said, can I call you back and hear it again? He's like, yes. And I did. And I was beside myself, and the freedom that I felt at that moment, it can't be described, but then I've gone, and we're going to talk about entrepreneurship in another episode, but I was trying everything. And
Yeah.
from that position of survival mode of trying everything to survive, because it felt like nothing was working, I made some good decisions and I made some horrible decisions. So, for me, it's, as a psychologist now, it's like the role of my mindset when I was in all of those different phases of life, and the relationship that not having money had on my decision making processes, periods of time where I was so unbelievably desperate and couldn't even see how desperate I was, and I couldn't see how that desperation was driving bad choices. Um, yeah, so instant karmic connection when I met you, Manny. Like, gotta talk about this.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's that. I'm just sitting here just listening. I'm just like, thank you for your candidness, because like that's the realest story I've heard from people, and it's not too surprising in that we have a society where we're we're focused on too much image, and there's so much focus on just saying like I'm in a situation now and I don't know how to deal with it, and then also like it's you don't expect to be in that situation, so you don't go out, you don't ask for help, you don't look at it that way, and you don't feel like you should
Hmm.
be, you and so you don't seek to get help because you don't, maybe you felt, do you feel like you deserved help? You felt
Yeah.
like you deserve help when you
Well, like,
okay.
in that position, at Stanford and at the private graduate school that I was matriculating at, I really tried to put the rosiest spin on it, again, because of who I was surrounded with. And so I was like, oh yeah, I live on a boat,
Mhm.
and that sounded like a luxury. They're like, wow, you must be loaded. And I was like,
Mm.
well, I don't really want to brag, but meanwhile, I'm,
Yeah.
going to the bathroom in a bucket and then driving around Stanford, right? It was it was bizarre on every level, but yeah, I was like, "Oh yeah, I
Mhm.
live on a boat," and I really tried to fake it. And faking it took a lot of energy,
Mm.
psychologically. It took a lot of energy to fake it. And then, of course, it all fell apart in so many different ways. Like, it fell apart. The facade just, I couldn't, it fell apart. So yeah, I was like trying my best to not look as poor as I was, but there was this
Mhm.
drive, and I heard it, I was actually in the context of addiction therapy, and somebody was talking about Odysseus, and how when he was on the cliff
Okay.
he had to make a choice. He was either going to fight the Spartan. Well, he was a Spartan, right? I'm probably mangling this horribly, but Odysseus was on the cliff and he was fighting the Persians. Yeah, the Persians were coming after him, and he had a choice. He could either plunge to his death off this cliff, or he could continue to fight. And it was that decision point that I think I had come to really early in life, that if I didn't fight for myself, if I gave in, I would just be jumping off this cliff. And so I had no plan B. And that's the only reason I made it through that time, is I had no plan B. It was, you get this doctorate and you figure it out. Like you don't go backwards. And sidebar, I was in Australia on a trip as an academic advisor, and one of the tour guides was talking to us about the Australian flag, right? And so on the Australian flag, there's the kangaroo. And they said, "Do you know why the kangaroo is on the Australian flag?" And I'm like, "No." And he said, "Because the animal cannot go backwards."
It's more than his humans.
Right? The animal can't go backwards. And I was like, that is my spirit animal. And because I had to come to that point of like, I'm not going to go backwards. And there is absolutely nothing that is going to stop me. You know, I'll sit here and I'll make this muffin last, and I'll live in a leaky boat, and I'll go to the bathroom in a bucket, and I'll sleep in the lab. Like I'm going to not quit this no matter what, because there was nothing to go back to. And so there is a bit of strength in that sense of desperation when it's like do or die, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your story sounds very familiar to me as well. Like I kind of go back, like I was very lived in a very rough kind of childhood situation. And so grew up in North Philly for a point, and I struggled. My parents struggled. And I got to a point where I wasn't sure if college was something that was for wealthy people, that was, and then I realized, and I kind of made a decision, and I probably wasn't going to go, and as a, black male in Philly, and, you have a number of different directions you can go. And, I think in high school I was uncertain, and I was, probably hanging around the wrong crowds, probably looking at, doing things that I probably shouldn't have been doing. But I remember in 11th grade, my guidance counselor came to me and she said, "You know what? I know you're smart. I know you can get out. The streets are probably not something you want to be at. Like, it's not going to happen." Like, I'm like 5'6", 135 pounds soaking wet. Like, like I need to take my behind to school and use my God given talents to do a lot of really great things. And that's what I did. And I was going through the FAFSA. I had a very similar story with FAFSA.
Yeah.
I had about $2,000 from my job, which was awesome for a scholarship. But I was really dependent on my money coming in. I'm not going to say which parent it was, but I was talking to that parent and I was saying, "Okay, I need you to fill this out. I need you to fill this out." So I already filled it out. So May goes by. I'm not hearing anything about any awards. June goes by. Nothing.
Wow.
July comes by. So, like, look, what happened? What happened? Where is your work? Oh, I didn't do it.
Wow.
I didn't want it to affect my ability to buy a house.
Wow.
I said, well, it doesn't have anything to do with each other. But if you had, this person had access. It's funny, he said had access to consultants and financial people that through a company that I actually work with further along in my career.
Oh my gosh!
And the guidance and advice that they would provide is only specific investment advice, right? You can't go to them and ask them about college savings needs and how FAFSA works and how student aid works. And, so parents are just like making assumptions. In this case, my parents just assumed that since there was something that they needed to be a part of, then there was some kind of impact to them if I had loans. And so I stole my education.
Yeah.
I stole my first semester.
Yeah.
I just showed up. I was short about like $8,000,
Amazing.
and I left, my PlayStation 2 at home. I left my TV at home. I was like, I want to make it very, very hard emotionally to kick me out.
That's the most gangster thing
And so I
that's the
just
most
showed
gangster
up.
thing you've ever done. I mean, you talk about you're not made
Like,
for the streets.
I'm not sure if I told anybody this story before. Like, I just like showed up. Like, I didn't pay. I didn't pay it all. Like, I gave them, they had $2,000 of the like $12,000, whatever the case may be, they needed. And I went to state school right before state schools got really, really expensive. It has obviously a good story, good ending. After a semester or two, I had a full academic ride, but I just showed up. And sometimes I think we also have to gotta do that. Like, we kind of can't say no for people. And, sometimes you got to just break the rules.
Yeah.
And so I showed up, I busted my ass.
Yes.
My first couple semesters, and I got a ride. But I would not have debt. I don't think I would have had debt if I got that support. But that's just one life lesson, like, where most people they think about financial planners and financial advice that's available to them. Most of the industries out there to give you specific investment advice, maybe insurance advice, in the context of selling you something. But when it comes to like asking questions about student loans and how does this all work, or how social emotional issues, like, people don't look at traditional financial planners. Or financial
they see them as separate, and they are definitely not separate. That's an amazing story. And I have even more respect for you, which I didn't think was possible. Like, I've got even more respect for you now after hearing that. I mean, my goodness, that is gangster. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, hopefully, your guidance counselor can see you now. Like, this is great. So, I mean, hopefully,
she passed away a couple of years ago. I heard.
But I'm so sorry to hear that. Yeah, the professor that let me sleep in the lab,
Miss Martella.
My professor who let me sleep in that lab with my baby, he passed away a couple of years ago, and it's just being there for people who are in a dire situation. That's oh my gosh, that's priceless. That's absolutely priceless. But I miss him every day. So, well, hopefully people found this interesting and relatable. I think I'd really like to hear about other people's stories about where they came from, if they're still in it, how they think they're going to get through it. And I think you can provide such good guidance on how do you still persist in seeing your dreams through to fruition, even when you're in a desperate situation. Like, how do you allocate those resources appropriately from the shoestring budget, the pennies budget, up to now you can breathe, and then beyond with the high net worth. So it's a full spectrum, but you can't divorce the humanity from finance ever.
You got to live how people won't, so you can live how people can't. And exactly. I recognize that even in multiple generations, after 2 or 3 generations and wealth and families in America, typically the wealth is gone. And it really has to come down to not just accepting that once you have money, that the ideas and what makes the most sense is going to come to your heart, and you're going to just information is going to come into your brain, and you're going to make the right decisions. It's making a conscious decision to think about your social emotional things. Who are you trying to prove? Who are you trying to prove to? And are they the right people to be influencing, with your clothes and that sort of thing? Are you borrowing money to keep up with the Joneses? Why is that the case? And in America, it's a shame, because we have education's been very, very expensive. I mean, I've had astrophysicists that have economic problems. Like, they're like, being smart and not having money is completely possible. Like, especially like, because education is so expensive. And we tell 17, 18, 20-year-olds, hey, once you go and you go to college, you graduate, there's going to be something at the end, and you're going to have that education. That's lifelong investment.
Yeah,
but the dollars and cents also have to make sense.
Totally, I fell for that promise as well. But in some cases, well, for me personally, that promise was my hope. I didn't see that it was kind of a vapid promise until I made it. And then I was like, wait a minute, where's the money? Where's the money that you guys said I was going to be rolling in like Scrooge McDuck doing backstrokes through my treasure? Like, where is that? And so, I mean, all along the way, it's been, what is going on? So, well, awesome. Thank you so much for, helping tell our story. I think that's amazing.
Yeah. Thank you for being candid and, help me kind of feel comfortable with just like kind of talking about being real, what happened.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I slept in the floor in my childhood. I lived in a basement apartment, triplex. And by the time I was 27, 28, you had to have $1 million to talk to me. And so it was this huge contrast between the group of people that I was talking to at 18 and in my circle at 18 versus my circle who I was talking to and at 28. And then, there's an abstract concept, right? If you ask, you ask people about astrology or, it doesn't matter whether or not you had enough money to land on Mars or anything like that, or the moon. Really about, what's between your brain, are you smart enough to understand concepts? And so a lot of it's in our society is meritocracy, but it's still, if you're not coming from a place where you had means, it's a cultural shock too. I deal with a lot of young professionals who are first generation like me, who came into corporate America, or second generation coming into corporate America, and it is a culture shock. Like, I remember when I was just talking at a meeting, I was like, this doesn't make any sense. My manager had to take me aside. It's like, there's certain ways you say things that, like, I don't sugarcoat anything. Really.
I love it.
That's how I talk. But no, you gotta. It's a lot of learning even after you learn like the book stuff, and especially to kind of fit into a culture if you're going up, from the middle class into upper middle class and more.
Yeah, and managing.
But thank you everybody for joining us. It was an awesome show. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, managing the imposter syndrome when you get into that different world. I mean, I think that's another show in itself.
Oh my goodness, we're going to talk about that. That's going to be another show.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Manny.
All right. Thank you.